Colossians chapter 1, this is talking about Jesus. He is the image of the invisible God. You want to know what God looks like? Get to know Jesus, right? He's the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. He predates it, right? For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. And you, talking to the church, you who once were alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, explain, anybody here? Yep. Yep. You reconciled in his body of flesh by his death, in order to present you holy and blameless and above reproach before him. In other words, Jesus represents you to the Father through his blood that he shed, through his death and burial on the cross and resurrection. His blood forgives your sin when you ask him, reach out for it, and he presents you to the Father as clean, holy, pure, blameless. How awesome is that? Yeah. Awesome. I mean, where were we? If indeed you continue in your faith, verse 23, stable and steadfast, not shifting from the hope of the gospel that you've heard, which has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, became a minister. I love how these verses describe Jesus. I mean, this is going to be a whole series, but it's not today. The image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, the creator of all things, seen and unseen, things I don't even know exist that he created. I don't have to know everything, right? He created all of that. He's before all things. He holds all things together. I had a professor in college who said he's the glue that holds the universe together. Guess what happens when he lets go? Not global warming. Well, maybe big. Well, that's not. He is the firstborn. Sorry, sidetrack. From among the dead. We celebrate that today. He had the fullness of God living in him. Think about that for a moment. The fullness of God living in Jesus. Everything God is, all the deity of God, the power, the wonder, the awe, the might living inside this physical shell of Jesus. Some people only saw the shell. Others were able to see and know the fullness of God through Jesus Christ. The fullness is described multiple times as you read through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We see all these little stories. We're not going to cover even a fraction of them, but briefly, we'll look at a few today where we see the fullness of God. The story, it'll be familiar to many of you, the story of Jesus in a boat, and a storm comes. He's with his disciples, and the storm is raging, and it's an intense enough storm that the disciples are men who are seasoned fishermen are afraid that the boat's going to capsize, they're going to drown, and they're going to die. I mean, they just know they're going to die. So they wake Jesus up, and they, because he's napping, he's not worried about it, and he talks to the wind and the waves. Matthew 8:26, he rose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. Some of you may need that in your life right now. And the men marveled. His disciples, the guys who spent time with him, the guys who knew him, the guys who knew him more than anybody, they marveled, saying, "What sort of man is this? Even the winds and the sea obey him." I've always had trouble getting 2-year-olds to listen to me, And Jesus could tell the wind, "Yeah, we're done. Go ahead and calm down." And they just did. "Peace, be still." And they stopped. The wind and the waves obeyed him. Jesus caused the blind to see, the lame to walk, the sick to be healed, the diseased to be healed, lepers to be cleansed. There are lots of stories that we're not going to talk about, but you can wrap it all up. This happened multiple times, I believe, but in Mark, it gives kind of a snapshot of one particular evening where Jesus did like all of these things. In Mark chapter 1, verse 32, that evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick, some local community, all who were sick, all were oppressed by demons. The whole city was gathered together at the door. So like everybody was hearing about these healings. They're bringing all the sick. They're bringing the demon-possessed. They're bringing all the people to Jesus. They're at the door, and he healed many who were sick with various diseases, cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak because they knew him. Why would they know him? Because the fullness of God was in him. They could see through the flesh. They saw the soul. They saw the spirit. They saw God. The demons, when they were before Jesus, saw God, not a carpenter. And they're like, what's he doing? What's he doing here? And he had total authority over them. On a different occasion, Jesus was out and about, and two demon-possessed men from a tomb, a grave area, come to confront him. The Bible uses the word fierce when it describes them. These are like, I don't know, what do you have to do to be called fierce? You know, I mean, I don't know, I suppose a lot of yelling, a lot of confrontations, a lot of breaking things, a lot of, just something. The whole community like avoided this area because of these demons that were fierce. Jesus isn't too intimidated by the whole situation because he goes over by that area, and the demons run up to him and they confront him. They know exactly who he is. They've seen him before. And so they ask a very interesting question in Matthew chapter 8. What have you to do with us, Son of God? Why are you here? Like, we don't want to, we're looking at our, spiritual time clock. I don't know why you're here. Have you come here to torment us before the time? These fierce demons are afraid because the Son of God, the fullness of God contained in the body of Jesus is before them, and they're like, what, are you here for the time of torment? Is it time? It seems early. Are you just picking us two out to just kind of torture us sooner than the rest? I mean, they're trying, they want to know what's going on. Now, we don't like to think much about like a place of torment, we don't talk about that these days, and there's people out there who really don't even believe there is such a thing. I mean, I have friends who are like, oh, my Jesus would never torment anyone. That's terrible. That sounds awful. He's loving, and that's all he is, Well, people who don't know Jesus say that. Demons who know Jesus saw him and said, oh, no, oh, crap. I was going to say that, and I thought, no, filter came on, and you broke right through the filter. Oh, crap. Things are not going to go well here. The Son of God is right before me, and he's going to torment me, us, there were two of them. The fullness of God in Jesus. It makes you wonder, at least it's always made me wonder when we approach the Easter story, if Jesus is God, right? The power, the one who created the heavens and the earth, seen and unseen, all authority given him. This Jesus, right, who can calm the wind and waves by his voice, who can heal the sick and the lame and cause them to walk, all those things. If he's so powerful, how in the world did a handful of like common dudes nail him to a cross and kill him? I mean, that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it does because I know the story, and it does to many of you because you know the story, but it is a fair question. And Jesus answers it in John 10 when he's looking ahead to the cross. It hasn't happened yet. It's not even on the radar, but he's trying to kind of soften the blow for the disciples because he knows ultimately why he's here and what's going to happen. And so he's trying to soften, kind of give something that the disciples later on will suddenly go, oh yeah, remember when Jesus said? So in John 10, Jesus says, I lay down my life that I may take it up again. Think that through. What is he saying there? Verse 18, no one takes it, my life, no one's taking my life from me, but I lay it down on my own accord. I am going to die for you, he's saying, of my own free will. I'm choosing the time and the place and how I get to do that, right? I have the authority to lay it down, and I have the authority to take it back up again. Death, resurrection. None of us can say that. I mean, because of Jesus, I get to resurrect. I know that. But it's like, I don't get to decide, yeah, I think it's time. I'm coming back. That was Jesus. That's what he's saying. I have the authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father. The disciples had no idea what he was saying. And I wouldn't either. I'm not downing them. What? He had the authority to lay it down, go to the cross. He had the authority to reclaim his life, the resurrection from the dead. So the process begins a little later on. And the first step, you could talk about what leads to this, but the first step is the arrest in the garden when he really shows everyone, I am giving myself now. And he makes it really clear. In John 18, Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, they went there with lanterns and torches and weapons. All right, so they're ready to go, right? They're ready to go. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, he knew the cross was coming, all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, whom do you seek? Oh, people with lanterns and weapons, right? Who are you looking for? They answered, well, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said to them, I am he. Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. And when Jesus said to them, I am he drew back. They drew back and fell to the ground. I wish I could have watched that one. These soldiers who came, and others, with lanterns and weapons to arrest Jesus, when Jesus says, hey, yeah, I'm who you're looking for, they fell down. I don't believe that was a suddenly, I just kind of, whoa, I just kind of tripped over myself. Right? There's something happened here supernaturally where Jesus knocked them down in some way. Now think about this. Think this through. These guys are coming to arrest Jesus. I've never been an officer, a police officer. I've never been trained in the military, anything like that. I have had some fascinating experiences in the past few months in jury duty where I'm hearing lots of officers give testimony. So I'm getting a little bit of the heartbeat, a little bit from a juror's perspective. But here's what I've learned, and anyway, just from watching movies and just being obvious, you don't go into a setting where a guy's with a bunch of friends with your weapons ready to go. You don't go into a setting lackadaisical. Hey, let's go get Jesus, right? You are on full alert, because you don't know how Jesus is going to respond. He might have a weapon he's going to pull out. Oh, yeah, you're going to arrest me? No, you don't, right? He might have a guy like Peter who pulls out a sword. Oh, wait, that happened. They have friends in the bushes waiting for an ambush. You don't know. So a police officer will go in, or a soldier, whatever, will go in full alert. The radar is completely on. All right, they're ready for anything that comes, so that if something happens, they are physically and emotionally ready to respond, and mentally, for whatever happens. I have done that. I have played sports. Even in football, we were taught that. When the whistle blows, you're on, you're on. Right? Whatever your position is, whatever your stance is, you don't just go, hear the whistle, because you're going to get knocked down, like quick. So whistle to whistle, you're on 100%. Mentally, physically, you're in a stance that you can protect yourself, you can brace yourself, but they're going to try to knock you over, you can knock them over. My point being, these soldiers were on full alert, going in to arrest Jesus with a group of his friends. They didn't just fall down. They didn't just trip. That's what I was saying. Jesus physically somehow knocked them down. I don't know what that looked like. I have no idea. But what I do know is every soldier who was there holding a weapon knew Jesus gave his life. They did not apprehend him. He gave himself to them. He was making that really clear. Oh, you're here for me? Just so you know, I give myself. And they all fall over, and then they got to awkwardly get up and like, well, what happened? You tripped me up. And then he allows himself to be arrested. The mockery of the trial that followed Jesus, in one portion of that is before Pilate, but he remains silent. He's being interrogated, and he asks all these questions, and Jesus just doesn't answer. Pilate finally gets upset. He's like, what are you doing, Jesus? And he says in John chapter 19, verse 10, will you not speak to me? This is Pilate talking to Jesus. Do you not know I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you? Your life is in my hands, Jesus, is what he's saying here. And Jesus, verse 11, answered him, you'd have no authority over me at all unless it had been given to you from above. So Pilate's trying to intimidate Jesus here. Your life is in my hands. And Jesus flips it and says, no, actually, your life is in my hands. I gave you the authority. I'm giving myself up. I'm giving my life here. Please crucify me. That's what I came to do. He didn't say all that. But yeah, that's what's going on here. He's giving himself. Why? Because you and I needed his blood to forgive our sins. That's why he came. So he's on the cross. The darkness covers the land. He speaks his final word, and he dies. And it is one of my favorite death texts because of all the things that happened at his death. It's just fascinating to me. In Matthew chapter 27, I probably read this every year at Easter. I work it in somehow. The curtain of the temple, this is Matthew 27, verse 51. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook. Oh, and the rocks were split. Oh, and the tombs were opened. Oh, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. Coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. And the centurion and those with him, those who were with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and all those things we just talked about that took place. They were filled with awe and said, truly, this is the Son of God. Now this is a Roman centurion and those with him. This is the death squad, right? This is just what they do. It's not like we're having a crucifixion. Read the manual. How do we? No, this happened regularly for Rome. It was an intimidation. It was a reminder. It was a public thing to say, hey, guys, keep in line or this is going to happen to you, right? So this is one of their death squads. They evidently even kind of enjoyed it. They mocked people as they died. They gambled over their clothing. I mean, it was a terrible, horrible thing. They saw death regularly. Generally, if people died, people wouldn't claim the body. They just throw them into this pit. I mean, it was nothing for them. They were just killing dogs as far as they were concerned. But something was different here. Something was different about watching Jesus die for the centurion and those with him. As they observed the events that happened, it impacted them so heavily, they're like, this is a god. Now, they're from Rome, they have all kinds of gods, and they've heard all kinds of stories of different gods, but they've only seen statues. They've never seen anything happen because they're not real. We know that. But for the first time in their lives, they're going, I'm seeing something here that I can't explain. This has to be a god. How do you explain darkness for so long? Conveniently during the time as Jesus is dying. How do you explain a perfectly timed earthquake? I mean, earthquakes happen. Usually not at the moment someone says, it is finished, and he lets the spirit go, and then the earth starts trembling. Okay, darkness, okay, that happens too. But now we've added darkness, and now we've added, what did I just say? The earthquake. Thank you. There's a list, I can't remember. But it wasn't just an earthquake, I haven't been in an earthquake. No, I have when I was in Taiwan. Anyway, like the ground rumbles, right? But it wasn't like a big one that I was in, buildings shake, but it's not like, I've never seen rocks split, right? That's like a different level. So you've got darkness, you've got earthquake, you've got not just like a crack in the ground, if that happens, who knows, but rocks are splitting open, in half, whatever is going on there. You have tombs opening. All these are coincidentally happening at the death of Christ. Any one of those things could happen, but all of these things together, and then dead people come out of the tombs. That's interesting. Explain that one, Charlie. And they're looking at this going, this had to be the Son of God. Maybe they heard some of the conversations and they knew what that meant more than I think they did. But they knew it wasn't a mere mortal. They might not have known the fullness of God was dwelling in him, But something significant happened, and they knew it. Now here it is, 2,000 years later, we still say that. Surely this was the Son of... Actually, we change one word. We understand the next part of the story. We generally don't say he was the Son of God. We say what? He is the Son of God. He still is. He is the Son of God. Matthew 28, the best story on the planet. Verse 1, and after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene, the other Mary, went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake. Well, that's weird. Oh, and an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, his clothing white as snow, and for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, "Oh, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I know you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. I mean, I know this is his tomb. He's not here, for he's risen. As he said, come and see the place where they lay him. Then go quickly, tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead. And behold, he's going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I've told you. I've done my job. I'm out. It's a messenger." Verse 8, so they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy, just like any of us, and ran to tell his disciples. And behold, Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." Hey. What? Right? And they came and took hold of his feet, and they worshiped him. And Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go tell my disciples, don't go tell my brothers, to go to Galilee, and there they will see him." He is the most significant words ever. He is not here. He is risen. Now, this is not a resuscitation where he's like, on the operating table and his heart stops and flatline, and then they do the paddles and somebody does the oxygen, whatever happens in there, and then he wakes up and writes a book and makes a lot of money. I mean, that's not what this is. All right, that's a resuscitation. This is a resurrection. In a resurrection, it's a very different thing. The lungs stopped taking in oxygen. See, he died, right? His lungs stopped working. This has been 3 days. You don't just go out 3 days without oxygen, right? So his lungs stopped. His heart stopped taking blood to the vital organs. So even if his lungs were working, his heart isn't working. His brain activity has completely ceased. There's no blood flow, no oxygen. The brain tissue has died. I was on some medical website this week looking at what happens when you don't have oxygen to your brain. I mean, I know, but I thought, well, let's see what they say. They said the brain tissue, when the brain tissue dies, there's nothing that can be done to heal it. Now, my first thought was, well, you don't know my God. He can do whatever he wants. But I get what they're saying. If I suddenly stopped breathing and oxygen stopped going to my brain, tissue would die, and it was like, well, he was a nice guy, I mean, it's like there's nothing you can do for me unless God wants to do something crazy. Decay has already started setting in. He's already buried. He's in his final resting place. They just were bringing more spices for more. It's an honor thing, and they want to, just finish some things up. So it's not like they had to move him anywhere. And something impossible happened on the third day. Jesus, who had full authority to give his life, also had full authority to take that life back. And at some moment that we don't know exactly when this happened, at some moment unknown to us, he took it back. He said, let's get this thing going. And the fullness of God once again entered the physical body of Jesus. That was now in decay. But when the fullness of God enters decay and death, it disappears. There's no death that can hang out with God. And the damaged brain tissue that cannot be restored was miraculously restored and began working again. And the lungs that weren't functioning before suddenly took a deep breath and started taking oxygen to the brain and keeping it healthy and fed and all that whole type of thing that needs to happen. And his heart that was already in decay sprung to life and began to beat. And his main organs began functioning again, and we don't know exactly how it happened. Somehow he escaped from the cloth without moving them, because now he's in a glorified body. There's all this stuff we don't know about this. We knew he could, go into a locked door, a locked room where his disciples were meeting and say, "Hey guys, here I am." Without opening a door. This glorified body was a different situation than his body prior. The resurrected Jesus could just do things. He could walk with people on a road and they wouldn't even know who he was until he wanted them to know. Then they'd be like, "Jesus, whoa, whoa." So he could eat fish with his disciples. He could just kind of vanish. He could float up into the air at the end, at the ascension. His glorified body was a different situation. So it wasn't a resuscitation where he just kind of came back and said, "Well, that was weird." He is a different physical thing now, but the fullness of God is in him again. I have a lot more questions about that than I do have answers, but the Bible does say that will happen to us someday. Because he's the firstborn from the dead, right? You and I would be the second and third, whatever order. We're coming too. I'm going to die someday, and my body will stop, and the brain tissue will be dead, and all those things will happen. And everybody will be like, "Oh, poor Dan," but no, I'll be fine. Because Paul says to be absent from the body is to be present with the Father, right? To be present with Christ, with the Lord. So I'll be with him, and it's going to be all great. And someday it's going to happen, the resurrection happens, and that soul gets reunited with the flesh. And I don't know, so what if you're cremated or eaten by sharks or cannibals? It doesn't really matter. He's God, he can do what he wants. That body is brought back, the soul is brought back, and we have this glorified body like Jesus. Again, way more questions than I have answers, but that's what I'm expecting. You could have it do it differently, and I'll be like, "Oh, okay." But that's how I understand that whole thing will go. So Jesus ascends to the Father, sits at the right hand of the Father. The church is born. You read through the book of Acts, there's all this history and story of the church and the struggles and the exciting times, and it's just a cool story through the book of Acts. And one by one, the disciples are put to death for their faith. Do you believe in Jesus? Yes. Stabbed, hung upside down, lots of different ways they died. Some 60 years later, here's John. He's the only one left, the only disciple left. And intense persecution going on with the church. They are literally dragging people out of their homes and killing them one by one, going name by name through every city, looking for names on the book of life. And the community had that they would, do you believe in, do you follow Caesar, or do you worship him as Lord? Do you call Caesar Lord, or do you call Jesus Lord? I call Jesus Lord. He's out, right? So one by one, they're going through every single name. And the church has had so many people die. Everybody's been affected by this, and they honestly believe this is it. This is the end of the church. We don't know what's going to happen. And so here it is, some 60 years later, John's still around. This is going on. Everybody's in panic or fear. Fear is in their life. And Jesus comes back for a moment to meet John, to see John. And we actually get to be the proverbial fly on the wall this time at this appearance, because John writes about it. Because Jesus gives John some insight. That's where we get the book of Revelation. It was actually a great book of peace to the first century people, Christians who were suffering. And it was like, "Nah, I win. Don't worry. I win. You win too. If I win, you win. It's going to be okay." That's Revelation in a nutshell. Okay, forget the charts. That's what it is. But here's the meeting. In Revelation 1, verse 17, John says, "When I saw him," Jesus, "I fell at his feet as though dead." Whoa. And he laid his right hand on me, saying, "Fear not. I'm the first and the last, and the living one. Oh, I died, and behold, I'm alive forevermore." John knew that. He'd seen him alive. But this was something. This is a new level. "Oh, and I have the keys of death and Hades." Man, I read that verse this week, and for some reason it just hit me. That's actually the verse I started with, and I'm going to go to the end with this one. Because I read this, and I thought, I don't know that my view of Jesus is big enough. I would fall down as if I were dead too. If Jesus suddenly appeared to me, in whatever's going on in my life and just showed up, and I'd be like, "Oh," and I'd be down, and he'd put his right hand, "Don't fear. It's all right. I'm here. I got this. I got this, John. I got this, Dan. I got this, you." how big is your view of Jesus? You don't have to answer. Think about it. I mean, is he a religious guy, yeah, I like the stories? Or is he the living God of the universe with the full living being of God living in him? With all authority in heaven and on earth, he says that he has. Don't feel too bad if you're like, oh, I'm kind of, yeah. Because John was right there, all right? I mean, this was his friend. This was the disciple Jesus loved. This is the one that was like his closest relationship on earth that we can tell. He walked with Jesus. He heard Jesus talk. He ate with him for 3 years. He saw the crucifixion. He saw the resurrected Jesus multiple times. He had spent decades teaching faithfully in the church to the point he's like the grandfather of the church, and everybody comes to him for advice and help. And he wrote several the books that we read in the New Testament. And yet John, who knew him this well, when he saw Jesus again face to face after some 60 years, he fell to his feet as though dead. The awe of coming face to face with the living God. Jesus was even bigger than John imagined. And what does he say? Don't fear. Don't fear. I'm here. I'm with you. I've got this. Got this. I think that's really the message today for Easter. Of not just today, that is the message of Easter. I've got this. I know things in life get out of whack sometimes. You lose the center of your faith, the focus of your faith. Schedules, priorities get out of whack and out of control, and it seems like everything starts spiraling downward, and your faith may at times seem weak or seem just meaningless, or maybe just neutral or numb or something. There are times you may want to give up. There are times you want to just give in. There are times you just want to run and hide. There's times, and it just seems like one battle after another, and you just want to quit. And Jesus comes up and he says, fear not. I got this. I'm with you. I'm with you. Whatever you might have going on in your life, whatever's consuming your mind, whatever may be causing anxiety and strife and fear, if there is anything, if there's any message in the Easter story, it's to fear not. Jesus is alive. 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 The one who freely gave his life for you came back from the dead, and he reigns eternally with authority and a power. He is all around you. He is in you. He is with you. He lives within you. Scripture says he is for you. Not in the surfacey thing, oh, you're going to win the race. I mean, yeah, you might, great, but you might lose the race, but he's still with you. I'm talking about a foot race, not the race of life. He's with you. So let me challenge you, encourage you, whatever, to go out and live your faith in the power of the resurrected God of the universe. Would you stand with me and let's pray, please?